Welcome to the Classics Podcast Does Virgil's Aeneid with myself, Caroline Lawrence.
And me, Katrina Kelly. Hello, and welcome back to the Classics Podcast Does Virgil's Aeneid, episode 2. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 1 and for coming back for more. We're so delighted to have you as part of this series. I'm joined as ever by my good friend, the author Caroline Lawrence, and today we're going to be looking into a new word which sets us off on a voyage through Virgil's Aeneid. And in this episode, we're going to delve a little bit more into some of the key events and the overall timeline of Virgil's epic poem. But if you'd like a breakdown of each individual chapter, or as he calls it, a book, 12 of them in all, then make sure that you check out the link in our description where we have listed lots of different free resources that can give you a bit more detail, including a friend of the podcast, Erica Stevenson, on Moan Inc., her YouTube series, which does just that. And if you would like also an under 30-minute kind of overall summary, a great one, then head to Natalie Haynes's Stand Up for the Classics podcast as well, where you can have her really, really great overview of the Aeneid. So, jumping off then, you may remember from episode 1 that we mentioned a hard stare. I've been trying to practice my hard stare. I don't know, Caroline, if we can have a face-off of our hard stares to each other, but I think we're giggling already. We're no good at this.
I'm no good at I am good at a hard stare actually, but only when I'm really riled. Anyway, yeah, it's so much fun. And you mentioned that, of course, Paddington has a hard stare. And the reason we thought of that is because last time we were talking about the word lumen, light, especially in the plural lumina, where it means eyes. This is because the ancients believed more or less in this theory of extramission, where we see by beams coming out of our eyes, kind of like Superman's X-ray vision, this is why we're looking at these words, specific words, is because they can open up the whole mindset, the whole world, and show us how that whole world is different. So, and if you think of people looking at each other with beams coming out of their eyes, it's easy to think of how someone's hateful or jealous glare could actually affect you. And this is the basis for the evil eye, which almost every culture has. And reading the primary sources, one of the things I think we often forget is that the ancients lived in a world full of gods, not just the Olympian gods, the famous 12 or 13 or 14, but demigods, heroes, evil spirits, good spirits. And every move you made was potentially dangerous. Every object, every tree, every well, every crossroads had its almost attendant little spirits. And that's why there's so many apotropaic devices on everyday objects in ancient Greece and Rome.
And you'd be struck as soon as you went into somebody's house, wouldn't you, by the different artifacts, the different aspects of religion. You'd have the household gods, you would have the lares, you might have a shrine to somebody's ancestors, and all those little almost formulaic practices that would just be so embedded in everyday life that as an ancient Roman you wouldn't notice doing them. They'd just be so much part of your ordinary going about your daily life.
Absolutely. And I just wonder, I think they were aware of these little invisible creatures everywhere, which we aren't today. We walk around blithely, and we look both ways before we cross the street. And sometimes we pray, utter a prayer here and there. But we live in a scientific world, and they lived in this world of invisible creatures. And I wonder if they were aware of them all the time. I think they might have been. And I mean, I started to notice them on things like a baby beaker, a little baby's beaker with a scary mask on it. And that's not because the mother wanted the baby to grow up to be an actor. It's because there's a little evil spirit that can turn the milk sour. And that made me think of, there's also this wonderful, it's from the 5th century BC, a Greek epigram. It's a kind of poem against imps of the kiln, that potters, because there are many imps in the pottery that can ruin your pots. And this wonderful little ancient poem from Athens from the 5th century BC talks about, it even names them. There's sin trips, the smasher, and Smaragos the basher, Asbestos the scorcher, Sabactes the shatterer, and Omodamus the unbaked. So these are all the things that can go
Brilliant
wrong.
names.
I know they're so great. So, and in this little poem, the unnamed poet, we don't know who it was. It's called a Homeric epigram, but it wasn't Homer. He says, I will sing you a song, Potters, for a small fee to keep away these demons. And I was just watching the biggest film that's just hit Netflix, K-pop Demon Hunters, which has already become the top grossing animated movie of all time. And it's got singing girls to keep away demons, because as we know, song can keep away demons. It's not just things you see, but it's like sounds, it's intricate borders on your clothing, it's laughter can keep away demons, so many things.
And we said last time about eyes and laughter because were those drinking cups that we talked about. So I know that we've got a slide here of you indeed, because those drinking cups at the ancient Greek symposia, when you tip them up, they would look like a face reflected back, and that's part of, again, of dispelling the evil spirits and making people laugh as well.
So our guest word for this episode, I'm going to say it now, right?
Yeah, we're going to say it together again.
Okay, so our guest word
Guest
for
word
this
for this episode
episode
is
is
Limen.
Limen, threshold. And that's the strip of stone, wood, or metal at the bottom of your door, but it means a flat, stretched out thing. It can also be the top beam of your bar. Um, and essentially a headpiece or a sill. And by synecdoche, that great term where a part stands for the whole, it can also mean an entrance or a doorway or even a house. And like lumen, our last week's word, limen is a neuter noun and declined a lot like lumen. Do you want to do the honors, Katrina?
I sure do. As you say, it's a neuter noun, so it starts limen, 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 liminis, limini, limine. In the plural, it's limina, 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 liminum, liminibus, liminibus. Lots of limens there. I mean, we've done lumen, we've done limen this week. We're not doing limon, the Latin word for lemon. But this actually, I wanted to just highlight to people another resource which you may already use, but which is a great way to kind of access the vocabulary and explore more of these different uses of some of these ancient words. If you go to Perseus, that's right, using the mythological character's name, perseus.tufts.edu, then that takes you to a great site which has so many ancient texts on there, which you can then look through in the original language. You can also impose and look at the English translation right next to them. But all of the different ancient words are clickable. So if you may find limen in a passage, so you can click on it. It opens up the Latin word study tool. It tells you it's a neuter noun, it explains a bit about the grammar, and then gives you loads of other references to other times that that word is used. For example, if you didn't know that's how it declined, you might not realise that limina is the same word as limen. And so it picks all of those out for you, and you can immediately draw those contrasts. I think I first came across the word limen when I was doing my GCSE Latin a very, very long time ago, and we had to study Ovid's Tristia. Now, this is one of Ovid's definite mopey poems, as he's about to be sent on off into exile and he's sort of bidding farewell. And he goes around his house and he describes how there's all these people mourning his departure, whether or not there were that many gathered, who knows. But he says, Ter limina, thrice I touched the threshold. And thrice then everybody started weeping again. But that bit is like you're saying in that explaining what the limen is, that it can be something physical, it can stand for the house, or in this case, he's touching the door, the doorway as he goes, which I think is quite a poignant scene. But it also is therefore something literal, but it can also be something figurative, and it's more that's what we'll be talking about today, isn't it? About that crossing of a threshold, that leaving or arrival at a point, a physical point.
Oh, that's such a brilliant example. And it's just reminded me, I think there's somewhere in the Aeneid where a woman leaving her house grabs the column of the porch and kisses it. And I've used that in one of my Virgil retellings where she clings to the column and kisses it. And it's so visual and physical, but again, symbolic, as you say. By the way, just it sounds like lemon. And I was doing a Latin summer school for kids this summer. I was guesting and I was telling them my little trick for learning vocabulary is to get a weird image in your head. So if you imagine a giant lemon on the threshold of your doorway, it'll help you remember lemon means lemon. Lemon means threshold. Um, and but you might wonder why. What do demons, imps, and spirits have to do with the word limen or threshold? And that's there because it's a boundary, a border. It's a very powerful place, and it's where demons and evil spirits often congregate. And this is so strange because from time immemorial across cultures and countries, these doorways are really dangerous, special, powerful places. And because you always, I guess, take a risk when you step from one space into another. And that's why even in Mesopotamia, we have things buried under the threshold, like little dogs that you couldn't even see, but an evil spirit could see those dogs. And to come back to a few thousand years after the Mesopotamians, Gandalf in Fellowship of the Ring says to Frodo, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." And again, I was just watching this new film, K-pop Demon Hunters, and the goal in that film is for these three girl band demon hunters to strengthen the Han moon, which is this magical barrier against the demon world, so that the demons can't cross over into our world and suck the souls out of people. So they want to eliminate the threshold. They want to just make this barrier. So it's so fascinating. It's so
Eliminate, indeed.
yeah, eliminate. And in the hero's journey, crossing the threshold is a key step in the hero's journey storytelling template. And the hero's journey is a kind of storytelling formula or giant trope that suggests that all the stories of heroes across time and space follow the same 20 or so steps. And also known as the monomyth, this theory was famously popularized by Joseph Campbell in his book Hero with a Thousand Faces. And then in the 1970s, George Lucas read that book and he used it to write Star Wars. And since then, almost every Hollywood screenwriter has used the hero's journey to structure his or her movie. And I could literally talk for hours about heroes and heroines of cinema and how they follow this formula, from Dorothy Gale to Katniss to Anna from Frozen. Can you think of any
I mean,
fun heroes or heroines who follow this
I
hero's
mean, for
journey?
sure, I suppose you've got Neo from The Matrix,
Yes.
um, Carl Fredricksen for sure, also. But like you say, Star Wars, like Luke Skywalker. I think you kind of want to find some ones that don't follow this, and then the more you think about it, and the more examples you come through, it's very hard to not find heroes that do follow this cycle and this journey. It's a really interesting way of looking and examining stories and films, isn't it?
It's so fascinating. And I have to confess, I love simplicity. I like black and white, and I like things that I can remember, kind of concrete things. It's why I write books for 11-year-olds, essentially. Um, and once it's pointed out, you do see it everywhere. And I was giving a talk again to some kids, and they were amazed when I pointed it out. And it's like one of these things when suddenly you see it everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if is writing in that way essentially then a formula? Is that actually quite epic? Is that Homer and Virgil? We know that Homer was writing, well, creating oral poetry through the use of formulae because the bards that were singing it really made use of using these formulae, these epithets, different types of language that was easily memorable. But I guess that's also part of the plot as well, and the bigger story is threading all of these different formulae together.
Absolutely. And in fact, when you talk about the muse, and I think we'll talk about this later, the muse, you think of, oh, kind of inspiration that comes from nowhere. But the muse is the daughter of Mnemosyne, the daughter of memory. And to remember all this stuff, we need formulae, and Homer the oral bards needed these little epithets and things. But people often say, well, it's a critic, oh, it's just formulaic. They'll say that about a Hollywood film. They won't say it about a brilliant film that follows the formulas, but it's a bit like, I like to think of it as it's a recipe for a really nice carrot cake. You have your ingredients, you've got to put them in the right order, in the right proportion, or
Mhm.
else you're going to have a big mess. And if you get the formula right, the recipe right, it's brilliant. So
Don't want that cake being a bit on the dry side though, do you?
don't want it too dry, don't want it too soggy. So I thought I'd do a quick overview of the hero's journey, and we might have a little slide even. But you imagine a ring, a cycle, and your hero is going to start at the top. And as we go through this, um, maybe um, think of what think of the different bits, and maybe you can pop in and say for anything, any film or the Aeneid or any story. So,
Yeah, exactly. It's good to, well, try and have the Aeneid in the back of our mind, I think, as we go through, and we're then going
okay,
to give some more detail, I think, as of each section. But we'll think of Aeneas, but also any pick a book, pick your favorite film or story, and see if you can follow this circle of the hero's
okay,
journey.
but you're right. Let's think of Aeneas here. So we start with the hero in their ordinary world at the top of this little ring, this circle. Now, their ordinary world, that's one of the tropes. That may be ordinary to them. It may be, but to us, it might be quite magical and amazing, like, Frodo's home, um, or indeed Aeneas's Troy
Mhm.
might be amazing to us, but to him, it's his ordinary world. So the hero in their world, there's something not right. Something's got to give. At best, they're stagnating, and at worst, they're going to die if something doesn't happen.
There's a war, there's a storm, there's shipwreck. We definitely have
Something,
those
or
things.
even in Romancing the Stone, one of my favorite movies, she's written these books and she's just keeping writing the formula, and she wants to freshen it up. Something's got to give. So the hero's not all they could be. They need to learn the best they can be. They need to learn something. And they almost always have a problem and a need. And the problem is the thing they know about consciously, and the need is the thing they subconsciously need to learn. And so the problem, because they have a problem, they have a desire, something that will solve their problem. These are your tropes: ordinary world, problem, need, desire. Now, sometimes the hero will set out to get the desire on their own, but usually, more often, they get a call to adventure. The call to adventure. Now, nobody likes change, so often the hero's been dreaming of, fighting the galactic evil empire or saving the princess or whatever. But when the call to adventure comes, they refuse the call because they got cold feet. No one wants to leave their comfort zone.
And I
So
guess in the ancient world, then this is why the gods are very helpful because they can provide that call to adventure, can't they? They can be that other force.
yes, and in fact, one of the steps I didn't mention is the herald linked to that. And we know the herald is usually Mercury or Hermes. One of the gods is sent down, or it can be Iris or one of the others. So these are very powerful in the Greek myths that you send. Every hero gets a god visiting them. Okay, you got to do this quest. So the hero often refuses the call. And at this point, the mentor appears to give them encouragement. And of course, mentor comes from the Odyssey. It's Athena in disguise as this wise old guy whose name was Mentor. And that's where we get the word mentor. So the mentor says to the hero, you can do it. Only you are called on this quest. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. And I'm going to give you a talisman, a thing that shows that you are called on the quest. Now, we're going to talk about the talisman a bit in later or in future episodes. It can be magical, but it doesn't have to be. But it often helps the hero leave their ordinary world and protects them on the journey. But the main thing it does is show that this hero is called on this quest and they are the chosen one. So it gives the hero confidence. Now comes the moment when the hero crosses the threshold into the world of adventure. They've agreed to go on a journey for the goal. Now, in a Hollywood movie, this moment often occurs about a quarter of the way through. You'll be amazed at how often the first crossing of the threshold is when they leave their ordinary world and go into the world of adventure. And this is the end of Act One. Hollywood likes three acts. Act One is a quarter of the story. Act Two is half of it, but it's broken into two parts of Act Two. And then Act Three is the last quarter.
Like an
So,
ancient drama.
like an ancient, yes, I guess so, absolutely. So, once the hero has is in the world of adventure, it's fish out of water. This is fun and games, and the hero meets some helpers first of all. And if the mentor hasn't already appeared, he will appear now. And then the hero must undergo some training to learn how to deal with this new world. And in many films, you've got the training montage here, where the hero does all the boring grunt work in a few minutes to the backtrack of quick cuts and a backtrack of a fun pop song, right? So our training montage, Katrina, of learning Latin would be many hours spent in the library, but we could sum it up in just 5 minutes with a pop song in the background showing us opening the dictionaries and going to Perseus and listening to Natalie Haynes or whatever. And I think in a few years there'll be an upload where we can just upload all our grammar into our brains. Yeah.
That sounds great.
So that's the training montage. Then the hero undergoes tests and trials. They have mini battles, mini fights with opponents, and opponents another important beat. Now, about halfway through, and this is amazing because it's it seems seamless, but you stop any film halfway through and you'll probably find the hero at their lowest moment, because this is the visit to death moment. And if you're thinking of your ring with the hero at the top, this is right at the bottom. And
Very
this is
fittingly. And we have this in the Odyssey. We have this obviously in the Aeneid too. And that's part of what Virgil's doing is when he's condensing both the Iliad and the Odyssey into one version. That halfway point is book six.
it's so brilliant, isn't it? It's so brilliant. And if you think of it, actually, not just Odysseus and Aeneas, think of other Greek heroes from mythology who visit the underworld. There's Hercules, there's Orpheus, there's Theseus and Perithous, there's Persephone. And they literally, almost every hero at some point visits the underworld. It's a real trope. And in modern stories, the hero can sometimes dies and is resurrected, like Neo in the Matrix. But sometimes it's just their bleakest moment. And it's also called All is Lost, often by Hollywood screenwriters. And sometimes in the underworld, at this bleakest moment, is where the hero battles the monster. And so think of, for example, Theseus and the Minotaur. The labyrinth isn't a literal visit to death. Theseus goes to death in another myth cycle, but it symbolizes that visit to the underworld. He's gone deep as he can into a maze to the darkest center. That's essentially the visit to death. And he must kill the opponent, kill the monster.
Yeah, and I think in the Fellowship of the Ring, we've got that point where they're in the mines of Moria, and again, they are going into the deepest, darkest depths and finding something that they thought might be hopeful, but then they have another threat that comes to them, and it's that sense of the journey just being too hard, or they're never going to get to their end goal.
Exactly. And this is all deeply psychological, which is why it's so powerful. And I mean, the myths hit all the psychological beats. So the hero might fight their big battle then, but whatever happens, although everything seems lost, the hero somehow gathers his resolve and goes on. And sometimes at that point, they also grasp the elixir, which is another of Joseph Campbell's phrases, tropes, which is just getting the prize, getting the thing you desired, the MacGuffin, to use an Alfred Hitchcock film. And now they've got the MacGuffin, the princess, the sword and the stone, the golden fleece, whatever. They've got to get back home. So now they have more thresholds to cross, little mini thresholds. And in most myth cycles, it's often called a myth cycle because they come back to home and they've changed. The world's the same, but they've changed. They've become what they were meant to be, the leader. And sometimes they stay in their new world, or sometimes they have to find a new world, like Aeneas. But
Or like Paddington 3.
or like and Paddington 1, in fact. Yes. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Any questions about that so far? Any comments?
I mean, I'm having all these different films and come into my mind now. It's a really helpful way of thinking about it. And I love the fact of this circle that we are thinking, you're thinking of the director's cut as well, aren't you? Of how to show all of those different things in the space of what might be a 90-minute, 2-hour movie. There's a lot to cram in there, isn't there?
So what can you think of? We're talking about Limen threshold. Can you think of some of these films or stories? Can you think when's the often the first crossing of the threshold is the most dramatic, and there are usually two main crossings of the threshold. The first one is when the hero leaves their ordinary world for the world of adventure, and the second one is the visit to death. But they're both often visually very dramatic, but it's often the first one where that's almost the poster of the film. So can you think of any in some of your favorite films?
Yeah, I mean, I'm struck. I'm thinking back to watching Harry Potter for the first time, and you've got, I think, you've got multiple limina there, haven't you? You've got his first trip to that Diagon Alley, Hagrid tapping on the wall and it opens up, and that is him crossing into that world of magic. But maybe a more striking one is a little bit later when he's then going through platform 9 3/4 to go on his adventure, to go through. Then you've got trips to you've got him entering the Forbidden Forest, I suppose, as a trip to death. That is the underworld of Hogwarts, as it were, the dark other side of it. Um, I'm cycling through my whole childhood now, so I'm thinking Twilight. That was maybe my next film franchise.
When does she cross the threshold in Twilight?
I guess when she first visits the Cullen house, I think it's entering the realm of the vampires, isn't it?
Oh,
But
I'm gonna have to
also
reread that.
yeah, that point. I'm thinking of the movie where it is very visual and it is that
Yes.
sense of there is a real sense of danger and threat, but it's obviously also the place that she's going to hopefully she wants to call, home as well with Edward. So that's a really visual threshold, I think, as she's entering that in that really amazing kind of murky, rainy Forks, North American backdrop.
And if I just run through some of my favorite films, and I'll start with the book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Of
And
course.
there's that amazing moment when Lucy goes into the wardrobe and through the fur coats into Narnia. That's just such a powerful image. And then The Wizard of Oz, you've got Dorothy Gale, a black and white tornado, one of the most terrifying scenes in any film, which that film's now 90 years old, but it's still a classic.
Wow.
Black and white tornado drops her into Technicolor Munchkin Land. And it was the first time they started her in black and white. And when she steps into Munchkin Land, into Oz, it's color, Technicolor. How amazing is that? Um, and there's Jean Cocteau in the 50s, the French artist, poet, filmmaker, made a film called Orpheus, Orphée, and he replicated hands going into a mirror by using liquid mercury and hands with thin latex gloves because you couldn't touch mercury. And then The Matrix did the same thing in 1999 with Neo going through a mirror to get to, and he's even going on a ship called the Argo, like Jason and the Argonauts. Um,
Catholics is everywhere, right? And then we've got Wally as well. Of course, can't forget Wally when he's clinging onto the
Probably
stage.
my favorite film of all time. When does Wally cross when is his main moment when he leaves his ordinary world and crosses the
I think when he's
threshold?
clinging onto that spaceship when he's trying to get to Eva.
Absolutely. And then you've got like the Hunger Games. I don't usually consciously think of these steps when I'm watching a film. I remember them after, but when I was watching the Hunger Games, the moment they show Katniss's foot on the bottom of the train door, and whenever a filmmaker shows you a foot in close up or feet or a hand on a doorknob like Rebecca,
Hmm.
think I tell my students, stand up in the cinema and shout, crossing the threshold.
So what about the Aeneid then? What's our point where
Okay.
Aeneas
Yeah.
is crossing that first threshold?
Okay. Well, when I talk to school kids, I tell them that Virgil's Aeneid and the first Paddington movie are basically the same story because both Aeneas and Paddington have lost their home and they must go in search of a new one. Now, I don't think there's one clear, well, there is to me a clear crossing of the threshold. But even before the Greeks burned down Troy and sacked Troy, and Aeneas crosses the threshold on his quest and leaves burning Troy. There's this wonderful moment where they're tricked into bringing the wooden horse full of warriors and death. And Virgil says it sticks at the threshold 4 times. Quater ipso in limine portae substitit. 4 times at the very threshold of the gate. It's stuck. It doesn't want to come in, but then they have to actually bash down the walls to get it in.
And of course, that's our best account, isn't it, of the sack of Troy in ancient sources. We might think it's taking place during the story, the kind of time frame of Homer and the Iliad, but actually we don't hear about it then. We only hear about it in much fuller detail in this part of the Aeneid where Aeneas is telling Dido he's looking back at what's happened and describing the sack of Troy.
So that's right. It's a first person account and everything. And this is why this is why the Aeneid would be my desert island book. If I could only take one book taught to a desert island, because it's got this brilliant cinematic, I mean, the whole thing's cinematic, but this book too, especially cinematic vision of the sack of Troy with all these unforgettable images, which we will get to later. So anyway, um, and actually, just a quick aside, I've written some books called The Roman Quests. And in the first one, I have a character called Juba, who's a rich Roman boy. He's 12 years old. And in the middle of the night, the Emperor Domitian sends men to arrest him and his family and possess their home. And the mother and the dad say, you've got to leave Rome and go to Ostia. So he tells his slightly OCD older brother and his animal loving younger sister, and that they're playing Aeneas fleeing Rome. So they're pretending to be Aeneas. And the brother says, does that mean I have to be Ascanius and jump Anchises and you have to carry me? So, and Aeneas leaves burning Troy, but then he goes back again and then leaves again. So he's really vacillating, a thing he does a lot. But so once Aeneas has finally left burning Troy, and we will come back to this later, he goes to the sacred grove on Mount Ida, and finds with other refugees and his aged father and his son Ascanius. His wife Creusa has sadly been left behind. And they build ships out of the sacred woods. We'll come to that again too. And he finally sets out from Troy across the sea to find a new home. And Paddington Bear has the same problem as Aeneas. His home has been destroyed. He must find a new home, London, where he'll always be assured of a warm welcome. And the little snow globe is a little symbol of that. It symbolizes his desire that he wants to go to London, just to help us remember. And his mentor, who's his mentor?
Well, his mentor is his Aunt Lucy, isn't it? She's the one that's packs him up in that little boat with his supplies of marmalade and is telling him off he goes and the place he's got to find.
So here's a little question. She gives him a month's supply of marmalade, a tag around his neck, and a hat.
Oh
Which of
yeah.
those is the talisman? Which is going to be the most helpful for him on his journey, reminding him where he's been, where he's going, that he's called on the journey?
I would say it's his hat, isn't it? Because although the tag's the thing that might help him immediately get some help, it's the hat that's about his identity, it's about who he's lost, who he's left behind, and it also is a very good hiding place for his sandwiches, so he's always got
Well,
something.
it's got a marmalade sandwich for emergencies, which is the best kind of talisman. But it reminds us that the talisman doesn't have to be magical. So,
Yeah,
yeah, so
and
now,
whilst he's got his uncle's hat, I suppose in a very different sense of a burden, Aeneas is carrying his father, as he said, quite literally on his shoulders, isn't he? And we've
oh,
got
I like that.
a coin that shows that with his dad on his shoulders and his other talisman, which is the palladium, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, I love that coin because it's a little it's a little mini masterpiece, and it shows it's a denarius of Julius Caesar, who counted Aeneas as his great 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 grandfather. So therefore, Venus is his great 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 grandmother because she's Aeneas's mother. And I love it because it's even got a little line under Aeneas's feet, which I like to imagine is the threshold.
There we go.
So then Aeneas is going to cross many thresholds, but the other big one he crosses is when he goes to the underworld exactly halfway through, as you said, the 12 books. And this time his mentor is,
The Sibyl,
and his talisman is,
the golden bough.
exactly, he needs something to help him cross. And for Paddington, halfway through, Remember that moment where he's in the London Underground and he's been separated from the Browns
Yes,
and he's standing at the top of the escalator looking down and his little furry knees are wobbling. And I
all
say to kids,
shaky.
like, I say, "Wait, remember the first time you went to the London Underground? It's like going to Hades. It's so scary looking down."
I
And
just remember loving the barriers, and you'd put your ticket in and it would come up and you'd walk through. And now in the days of Oyster cards and contactless, you just don't get that same experience.
yeah, you don't get that same, again, a threshold. It's a great threshold, though you still can get, like, there's that bit where the doors bash his nose. But he's standing at the top of the escalator. His little furry knees are wobbling together. He needs a mentor and a new talisman at this point. He looks around for encouragement and sees a sign on the side of the wall that says dogs must be carried. And he doesn't realize it means if you have a dog, you have to carry it. He thinks, oh, that'll help me cross this threshold. And it just then cuts to him he's holding this cute little chihuahua going down the escalator, and the music is James Brown. I feel good. I knew that I would know.
It's so good.
and and this is what the talisman does is it gives the hero confidence. And we don't know where he's got the chihuahua at this point, though that's a setup for a payoff later. So I just love that. I don't think Paul King, the writer director, did that consciously, but he knows that thresholds are fun. Maybe he did do it consciously. Actually, I have a whole story about that where I collared him at Michael Bond's funeral and asked and said, "I think you're a genius of storytelling." And he looked quite alarmed until I said, "I think you're a genius of storytelling." Anyway, there are lots of crossings of the threshold in the Aeneid. Many mention the word limen or limina, which is the plural, but essentially the same, though it's for poetic purposes or meter. So, how about let's start with book one? Now, we start with book one in medias res, as we said last time.
hmm So yeah, we don't start at the beginning of Aeneas's journey, that point in Troy that we've mentioned. We're already further on, aren't we? And we're actually in Carthage. Aeneas is cast onto the shores of Libya by this storm that's been whipped up by the gods. And then he comes to Carthage, he comes to the Temple of Juno. Last time we spoke about some of the things that are depicted on that temple. But we can have a bit of the Latin here, I think, can't we?
Yeah, do you want to read it?
Sure. So we've got Huc septem Aeneas collectis navibus omni, ex numero subit ac magno telores amore, egressi optata potiunto tres hyena, et sali tabentis artus sinitore ponunt. And the hyena is the word for sand, isn't it? Which
Yeah,
means
like we get arena from that.
arena. Yeah, exactly. So that's to this place comes Aeneas, having collected 7 ships. From the number of them all, with deep longing for dry ground, the Trojans disembark and gain the longed for sand and plonk their salty limbs onto the shore.
I'm doing this in a brutally kind of literal way, but I'd be more creative, of course. If you once you've got the basic, you can then make it more think what was he thinking? What does he want us to think? And the word plonk is my one liberty with the word ponent, they place literally.
I think that's good. And it reminds you plonk plank as well of them coming off the boat onto the shore. It's very woody. It's that feels very tactile as well, that sense of them collapsing onto the sand after their long journey. So we
It's
don't have the word lemon in that section, but that's setting the scene, isn't it, for
exactly, exactly. You don't actually have to have the word Limen for them. You can see they're going from one world, from that wet, damp world, to the longed for sand, and they're flopping, and they're in a new continent. In fact, a new world. They're in Africa. They're
yeah. And
yeah.
so that's book one, line 170, following on from there. But about 150 lines later, we have this arrival of Venus, so Aeneas's mum, but he doesn't necessarily realize that she's in disguise, as so often the gods are in ancient epic. And she says, "Only go and take yourself from here to the threshold of the queen. Pergimodo atque hinc te regnae ad limina perfer." Ad limina, to the threshold of the queen. And again, that sense that it's a literal place. It could be, I suppose, translated as the palace or the house or the home of the queen, but it is a more literal sense that you've got to go to her. She's not going to come to you. This is part of arriving in a new place and taking himself to what's going to then become I suppose, a plot device, a dramatic point, because once he's crossed that threshold, he's going to start falling in love. Is he going to want to leave? Is going to be the next barrier, isn't it, in his journey?
Yeah, and just as you were saying that, it's this is her realm. She's in charge. This is her territory in a way. So limina can even mean territory. It's got so many uses, so many meanings.
Yeah. And so from then he comes further along. And another 100 lines or so later, we then get this description, don't we, of Dido, who is building this huge temple to Juno in Carthage. And he describes it as it's opulent with votives and with the presence of the goddess, Juno. Its bronze threshold rose high on steps, and doorposts fixed with bronze, and a hinge that squealed with brazen doors. So this is Aeneid 1.446 in Latin.
Now he's used the word bronze or a word for bronze three times in the three sub. That's he knows exactly what he's doing. I think we'll talk next time about how he would spend a day on two verses. You know, he every word he knows exactly what every word is doing. So he's mentioned bronze three times here, and bronze, and this is a bronze and marble temple high on a hill looming over Carthage, devoted to Juno, the great enemy of Aeneas, super enemy territory, bronze and marble, so hard, so cold, bronze, the metal of armor. So this is really quite sinister in a way. And then that last line, aere trabes foribus cardo stridebat Aeneas, and stridebat, squealing with bronze. It's a kind of, you can almost hear the bronze door squeaking. Oh,
Mhm.
there's that wonderful scene in Jason and the Argonauts, the Harryhausen one, Ray Harryhausen one, where they go into the tomb of Talos, that big character who's kneeling, the big statue kneeling, and it squeals when they open the door. It's really sinister.
So I think we might, if we go from, we've described how in book 2 and 3 we have Aeneas's description of his journey to date. So we go back to how he left burning Troy, then went back again, then left again, and eventually, as you say, got his sail from Mount Ida and sails off in his ships. And in book 3 we then see him going from one potential homeland to the next, and there's all sorts of problems. So again, on that hero's journey, I suppose about a quarter of the way through, all these different sort of failed attempts at reaching that end goal are built up until we get to book 4, which is what we might call the Dido book, isn't it? It's the follow-on from book 1. We kind of skip back to the in medias res of book 4, and there's this section where Aeneas enters a cave, the cave scene, this kind of really shady sense of what actually went on in that cave. It's called a marriage. I think that it's a Greek word, isn't it, that's used like the hymenaeus. That this is kind of meant to become a marriage, but is it consummated? Is it really? It's not a legal marriage. Who knows what it is?
And although there's no Limen mentioned there, this is a very famous line of Aeneas. I've been watching this Llewellyn Morgan, a professor at Oxford who is a Virgil expert, and he talks about this line in Aeneid 4 165 when there's a storm driving Aeneas and Dido into the same cave, and it's just one line and then an ingem at the next word of the next one. It's Speluncam Dido duxit Trajanus eandem de veniunt. To the same cave come Dido and the Trojan leader. And Llewellyn Morgan says, now Virgil was so proud of this line of poetry that he repeats it with a very minor change. It comes a bit earlier with De Venient. They will come when Venus and Juno are plotting how they get these two crazy kids together. And then sure enough, it comes about just as they planned with De Venient. They come in the present tense to the same cave. But what Llewellyn Morgan points out is that the word speluncam at the beginning, let's say they reach the cave, that gives you the accusative sense. They reach the speluncam, and then eandem at the end of the line is the same one, and it's like the cave is enclosing Dido and the Trojan leader. So they're in the cave. This is one of the ways where reading the Latin, there's no substitute for knowing the Latin.
Mhm.
And Llewellyn Morgan says, he was very proud of this line, and he should be proud of such a fantastic line.
And we do actually get a reference to Limen, not at the point with the cave, but just before that, when Dido and the Queen is in her bedroom before setting out on this kind of Phoenician hunt, which is going to then culminate in this cave scene. And it describes how she's getting ready, and she's then bedecks herself in purple and gold as befits a queen. So it's very much that point. This is her in her ordinary world, and then across a threshold to then go and enter the world of her and Aeneas. And it's really kind of building her up as a queen beforehand, because we then also know she's been also described as a wounded doe, the kind of afflicted by this love wound, slightly losing control. And later on in this book, things are going to go downhill for her. So this is her sort of at the height of her powers, the height of her being a queen, crossing that threshold, which is her place of power, I suppose, as it were, before she then goes to meet Aeneas.
This has never occurred to me before, but as you were speaking, I'm imagining her in her bedroom. She's in love, getting ready, putting on all her clothes and everything, and to make herself look beautiful. She's been forced into falling in love with Aeneas, though he's good looking and he's a hero and he's a good dad and wants the same thing she does. I wonder if she's almost saying, if I leave this room, I'm going to be, I know what's going to happen. I want him, and I'm going to make sure something happens between us. And again, it's where the physical crossing of the threshold symbolizes an inner decision that the hero makes.
Yeah.
She's made a decision to break her vow that she'd never marry again, etc., etc. So that's really powerful. Thank you for that.
Okay, so I think we are getting a real sense of these different thresholds within the Aeneid, but you're going to have to come back for part two of Limen, because we have so much more that we want to tell you and to explore. We're only up to book four of the Aeneid. There's still a lot more to go through in this hero's journey and thinking about those different thresholds and limina. So please come back for part two.